Hello and welcome to this episode of Sip and Sync with Azure. In this one, we're talking about a very important topic, product management in the age of AI. It is evolving quite significantly as to how product managers get their job done, gather those requirements, collect all of the stakeholder feedback, and then create a product requirements document for the rest of the engineering team to build product and then release it out. All of those steps are very heavy in how the business operates and that context. So I have invited Suzanne Daniels from our team to talk about every single step and how we make that happen within the Microsoft stack. So let me call Suzanne and we'll get started. Welcome, Suzanne. Give us a little bit of an intro of who you are and product management and AI and the demo that you've been working on.
Hey, Priyanka. So thank you for having me. I'm Suzanne Daniels. I work as a chief developer advisor at Microsoft, advising customers about anything to do with software engineering. I know that you're really particular about the tea that we're drinking. So I have Camille tea because I'm so excited. I figured to have something soothing today in my cup. So
That's
just so you
awesome.
know.
I'm trying to switch from coffee to tea, so that motivates me.
I can recommend it. Besides the tea, we're here today to talk about this topic that often comes up in conversations that I have. And that is that we see two things. One, it's the PMs. So the role of the product manager is changing and has been for the past few years. But now with AI, what we see is that that really enables PMs to do more different things, to expand their role. And a lot of the PMs use AI day to day and multiple AI tools to do parts of their work. For instance, a PM does not longer have to wait for a designer. If there's a design brief and there's enough context about the designing, and there is a tool, then the PM can use AI to help with imagining what the application will look like after a change and help with really going through that whole ideation process. The other thing is that we have, of course, software engineers that use coding tools like GitHub Copilot to really speed up the development of software, but also improve the quality and the security, and really getting more focused on finding creative solutions to the challenges that lie ahead. So really focusing on that, on outputting that value. But with that, there's one problem that often arises, and it's formulated as a question, and it's like, why and how can we leverage AI to collaborate better? Because it's now product management and engineering, but having these handoffs is oftentimes copy pasting documents or parts of documents between interfaces and AI tools.
So how do we do it?
Well, that's a great question, and I know that you like graph. So I bought a schema, brought a schema for you. So let's take a look at that. So what you see here is a part of the product development lifecycle, but also the software development lifecycle. And I changed it a little bit around to make it more clear what we're talking about here, because when we talk about handovers between product and engineering, we are talking about collaboration. And on that left-hand side here, we can make massive improvements by using AI. Um, we see these roles as very different, but the secret, or maybe not so secret, is that oftentimes we're all just stuck in meetings all day, right? And in these meetings, um, actually happens something really valuable, and that is that we make decisions, we exchange ideas, we raise questions, and all of that is context, and that context is super important to build good products. Now, with these transcripts, with documents, with brainstorm session outputs, we can actually help AI do a better job for us. So, if you use a collaboration platform like M365, you have this agent, M365 Copilot, um, and with M365 Copilot comes something really, really valuable. It's a context layer called Work IQ, and it makes collaboration between humans and agents, but also between humans and humans, much more easy because all of that context that you have, business, strategy, documents, enterprise knowledge bases, that stakeholder interview, user interviews, your team meeting. That's all valuable input when you want to build new product, when you're working on refining a BRD or you're working on the product requirements document, the PRD, as an example. And you have a clarifying question, and you can just ask Copilot and it will help you with that. And infuse all of that information, those objections, all of those recorded decisions into sets of documents that will later on help us with the development process.
And I don't have to do all of this in all of these different tools. I can do it from one place. And so now I want to see it.
Yes, because we stopped at of course creating that document. So let's imagine that we have created that PRD based on um, the business requirements and some inputs and other sources, and we have compiled a PRD. But in my career, what is the most frustrating thing is when we have a PRD and it's like a castle in the sky and not really grounded in the reality of what is actually happening in your repo. And this is usually a spot where friction happens. But because we're not talking about the same things, maybe there are some assumptions when we created the PRD, or maybe in the time that we were creating the PRD, the reality in the repository actually changed. So what I'm going to do here is I'm in Copilot CLI and I'm going to ask Copilot a question. So I pointed to the phase one plan for an upgrade of our application, and I'm gonna ask it to analyze both that PRD and the repository and write a report on the gaps and the risks, because I want to make sure that when I go into the actual planning session with my engineers, that this is grounded in reality and I address the right questions instead of proposing a plan where people will not recognize what I'm talking about,
Yep.
or will say, well, there's some things happening here that we kind of don't agree with. We lose energy on that. We need to look things up, find things out, and do a meeting later on. So GitHub Copilot used the document that we have on SharePoint using the WorkIQ plugin and created this report for me. Now, why am I doing this in this tool and this environment is because this document is something that is actually super useful for the engineers. And I want to save it in Markdown with the repository as an artifact that we can use. So as you can see, it made a really well written report for me and identified the risks and the gaps that we need to talk about. Now, as you see here, there is a question and it asks me if I want to create I want to create the issue. So I'm gonna say yes and also create a work breakdown. So I'm gonna let it run. And what it will do now is it will actually create, before I have my meetings, all the issues. Um, but the most important one is that it will create an issue for me that has this summary of questions that are needed to be resolved before we start working on all of those other issues. And that is exactly the input that I need for my meeting. I have my issues to do the planning session, but first we need to address those questions because that is the real thing that we need to tackle. That's what makes it a valuable meeting, both for me as a PM, but also for the engineers that need to be involved in these decisions. So it's going to go ahead and create the issue, an epic, and some sub-issues. And as you can see, it will do that right here from my Copilot CLI. And then when that's done, I can use those issues in my planning meeting. So as you can see, the issues have been created and the open questions are here. And these are the things that we are going to discuss in the meeting. Now, I could send out the link, but we have a Teams channel. And in that Teams channel, I'm going to call my agent Clip. Clip is an agent that I have developed with a connection to the GitHub repository and to the GitHub graph. So it can help me answer questions about anything software development related. And this is available to the whole team. So as you can see, I use Clip to, in the Teams chat, to give the questions already ahead of the meeting. Now that meeting took place, and during that meeting, we made some decisions which ended up in an ADR because that's what we do with those transcripts. And this is the view of Brooke, one of our engineers, and she's going to work on this issue and uses that ADR using WorkIQ and the issue, which is on GitHub Issues, and look at how she can use those decisions to update and to resolve the blockers that might be there in this issue before. So these are going to be removed and updated in the issue so that it always has the latest state. Normally, we would obviously collaborate around this and say, hey, I've updated the issue, can you take a look? And then at some point start working. But of course, this is a demo. So we're just gonna go ahead and create a plan because we have these recorded decisions, we have updated the issue, but now we need to make sure that Copilot applies the plan correctly, right? We need to verify this plan. So what will happen is that we see this whole plan being created, and you see that the decisions that we have recorded before are applied to this plan. So we can go over this document. Normally, we would create a pull request and have a review being applied here. And of course, as soon as we have validated the plan, then we can start going to implement this, which is, of course, the next thing that we will do. And we will apply this to the code, then create a branch, and then we have to review. So this is how we actually went from that idea, that meeting that we had, a set of documents, and really go into the coding part without any blocker in between. And this is specifically why it's so important to have that first phase, because as you can see, the planning and coding part, that goes super fast. But that is because we did the right preparation at the beginning.
Yeah, because what you're doing here is you're taking all of the context that is needed to make that product decision requirements possible. And then once you have the details of that, then you start to plan, implement, push it out, create issues, and then plan, implement, push it out. And it really makes the flow very much this work IQ context layer, which is rightfully in the pink, red, because it's so important part of this whole puzzle that right now, many people are struggling, many organizations are struggling for the context layer. And with Microsoft Stack, right, because all of your organizations talking to each other in the documents in M365, in Teams, in meetings, that context is there, served on a platter in the form of work IQ. And that's where I see this huge value, especially for the enterprises, to be using this. And the other key thing I noticed as you were talking was you did not go out of Copilot CLI. You stayed in it, but you had all of this information getting in there through this work IQ context layer, which is amazing.
I know, right? And that is exactly the whole idea here, because if we want to collaborate, it should be seamless. And that is why if an engineer would be working in Teams, you could ask questions about your issues. But when I, as a PM, am on the CLI, I could ask questions about my documents in relation to the actual code that is in the repository as well. These boundaries are blending, And that is exactly what we need to be more successful at creating software, because those constraints, those specifications that we have, that is what actually will make the software. And the coding part is, of course, very important, but the collaboration part is where we really will create better, more exciting software and get better value out of it while speeding things up.
Exactly. And to close things off, I'd love for you to share where the audience, where folks can actually get access to this demo, do this themselves, create something of their own. Where can they go do that?
So the WorkIQ plugin is available as a plugin in your Copilot CLI. So you can just get started there. It's also in VS Code available for you to use. And the great thing about this is that you authenticate with your normal authentication flow. So it can access everything that you normally could access as well. Um, so we don't have to make it super complicated. The only thing that you need is GitHub Copilot, M365 Copilot, and access to the Work IQ with the plugin. And then you can start making that connection to your documents and unlocking that right from where you're working. And I think that's the best demo there is. It's your own context, and it's your real data that you can use. Do you want to prepare for that next stand up? Ask WorkIQ for help with that. Do you need to report on that one test that failed? You can use WorkIQ for that as well, right? So it's really a powerful tool that is just there. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about it.
Thank you for joining me today, and thank you for watching. We will put all of the links to the GitHub repo and the documentation for WorkIQ, how to get started, and we'll see you in the next one.